Hey, Steve Saretsky here. As always, Canadian real estate market update with a particular focus on Vancouver. If you're getting sort of value or entertainment out of these videos, all I ask that you hit thumbs up and subscribe. Questions, comments, put those below. Feeling good here on a Friday as I'm filming this. The sun is out. It's been a long, busy week, and I want to make a first disclosure. I am simply the messenger, and so I ask that you please do not shoot the messenger, because this will be a controversial and hotly debated conversation this week. If you weren't following the Twitter sphere, where I am active at Steve Saretsky, and go give it a follow. Adam Vaughan in Toronto, member of Parliament, apparently the Housing Secretary of Canada. I didn't know we actually had one of those, probably because he's not doing his job. But anyways, we have a Housing Secretary of Canada, and he was basically caught, or not caught, but at least called out in a recent interview, to which he basically said to the media that, you know, we don't have a great housing market here for local Canadians, but we do have a great housing investment funnel for foreign investment. So he was kind of obviously, quite happy about that. But he kind of went later on to basically say that a 10% home equity decline, aka a price decline of 10%, will basically be unfathomable and highly discouraged by the federal policymakers. So to which everybody obviously quite literally basically dogpiled on this guy on Twitter, basically saying it's 10%. Adam, it's just 10%. What do you mean we can't have a 10% correction? And so you see, as me, the messenger, that this has kind of been the whole shtick that I've been telling you, particularly since the onset of the pandemic, because the policy-making decisions have never been more clear and more blatantly obvious that people don't like what the government is doing. People want internally for home prices to crash so badly because that would be the right thing to have a natural price correction. But the reality is that it is a heavily manipulated market. It is a heavily incentivized market, right? The fact that we don't have free markets, I think, really irks people, and you can really see the government's willingness to intervene, and obviously coming out publicly and saying, "Holy smokes, a 10% correction? Are you crazy?" But when you actually start looking past this now, you say, "Well, hold on, 10%. It's not a whole lot. 10%. I mean, gosh, equity markets correct 10% all the time." But in Canada, again, that cannot be allowed to happen. This is the economy. So look, for example, now we have the March data coming out of the Canadian Real Estate Association. A 10% correction. You've got, in the past 12 months, home prices are up. The national home price, as measured by the Home Price Index, is up about $120,000 over the past 12 months. Now, again, if you equate that on an after-tax basis, that basically works out to about $190,000 of sort of after-tax income, because obviously you have to remember that Canadian housing, your primary residence is capital gains exempt, and so having a $120,000 gain is significant. And the fact that we have policymakers coming out and saying, "Whoa, 10% correction, we can't take 10% off of 120. That's just this year. Forget about the past 20-year bull market that we've seen." So I think this really shows where policymakers' heads are at, and I've just come out more adamantly over the past year, basically saying, "Listen, guys, this is everything that they're doing. You've got the QE, you've got unlimited printing, federal government, unlimited federal deficits. You've got banks and policymakers' willingness to come in and provide mortgage deferrals, and so they will just continue to change the rules." And so, for example, we just had the mortgage stress test was just increased, right? They say, "Oh, look, policymakers, they're trying to cool the housing market." There is actually, and this is a little bit under the wraps, but there are some lenders, obviously myself being fairly connected here in the industry, that they are actually behind the scenes loosening credit requirements. So they're loosening their debt service ratios, to offset the mortgage stress test. And again, I don't just say things for the sake of saying things. This is all internal information that I received. So there you have it. So the stress test is largely, the increase to the stress test is largely a political phenomenon. It looks great in the headlines. We were doing something. And don't forget, you had Krista Freeland coming out just after the stress test was announced and saying that we will use this new stress test to watch what happens with the housing market before implementing new policies. So we'll see on Monday when the budget comes out. We'll see. But I'm certainly not anticipating them to touch the golden goose because it is the housing market. And let's talk about the housing market now for a minute. So we know that prices are up. In fact, we have the latest data from the Canadian Real Estate Association that national home prices are now up 20%. 20%. That's the home price index, guys. That's the home price index up 20% nationally. This is the fastest inflation of house prices ever. Okay? This is the fastest inflation of home prices ever. That actually surpassed the 2017 boom. So if you remember the 2017 boom, everyone going absolutely bonkers over real estate, you have nationally home prices rising faster. Now, again, this is the home price index. This is a hedonically adjusted formula that factors in everything that's selling and spits out a number. So if you want to say, well, I don't believe that number. Okay, well, your average sales price now is up over 30% year over year. 30%. So your average home price is up 30%. Now, obviously, again, we know that more houses are selling than condos, so that's why we look at the HPI. But don't forget, it was this time a year ago when we had CMHC coming out and saying, a 9 to 18% correction was feasible. I mean, your average price is up over 30%. So, and again, obviously, going back at it, I said, okay, yep, Evan Siddall, CMHC, this is probably a reasonable forecast. Everybody buckle up. And then as you start to see the policies coming out, okay, mortgage forbearance, Bank of Canada, $5 billion per week. OSFI lowering the stability reserve ratio. Okay. And then you start to pivot. So you're always watching the data. But again, keep in mind that we still have a scenario where you've got record home sales, you've got a situation where this is not a market that has home prices up because people aren't selling. You have new listings again in March running at record highs. So people are putting their homes on the market for sale. This is not a situation where people are fearful and scared about listing their home because of COVID. Oh my God. People are listing. You have record new listings across Canada, but it's simply a factor of the demand. The number of buyers is overwhelming that supply, pushing overall inventory months of supply, sub two in Canada, is why you have home prices up again nationally 20%. Remember, go back and watch probably the last 3, 4, 5 months ago. I told you in these videos that it's basically baked in the cake here. You will see record high national home price acceleration in next year, and we're going to continue to see that number is going to push higher in the next couple months. So 20% increase nationally will push up to 22, 24, 25%. That again is already baked in the cake. So regardless of what happens in the market from here on out, if it starts to turn, that is not going to show up in the numbers for many, many months. So yeah, I mean, that's pretty much what I've got for this week. Again, don't shoot the messenger, as I've talked about before. Yes, I understand the frustrations around government, around their intervention into free markets. There's never been any free markets. I understand that valuations are extremely stretched, and I'm not suggesting that a correction can't and will not come, despite the government intervention. Because anytime you have national home prices inflating to record highs, it's logical to assume there's a probability in there that home prices will correct. But if you're looking for that big crash, I think that, again, if and when at some point that may come, that will come from an outside factor. That won't come from the government's willingness to suddenly say, hey, let it go. Bank of Canada, stop doing that. Remove all the CMHC insurance from the market. Tell the banks to stop lending. That won't happen. It will be an external force. There'll be some sort of, and I've talked about this in an interview with Keith Dicker at IceCap Asset Management, is that it will be an external force. It will be a situation where you'll have some sort of systemic or financial crisis in the Eurozone, where corporate junk debt starts spiraling out of control, or there's a sovereign debt crisis in Italy, and that will then permeate through into the Canadian financial markets, and that will push basically yields up. It'll freeze bank lending, and that's how you get like a house price crash. It won't come from a willingness from regulators to suddenly say this is not fair. Again, look at the incentive structures. The reality is politicians are extremely well paid. They're on the housing ladder, the vast majority of them. And the reality is that they cater to those, the donors. And who are the donors? So you have to understand the system first and foremost. And the system in Canada is this ingrained belief now that over the past 20 years that home prices only go up. I mean, there's a great chart here from TD that shows the gross outperformance in Canadian home prices versus the equity markets. And keep in mind that when I show this chart, that you're actually this is a 5x, this is a 5 times levered investment. So you've got Canadian housing, like you can't just call one for one, $100,000 into Canadian real estate or $100,000 into the TSX. I mean, when you buy a house, you're levering that probably 5x, right? So, I mean, the gains have been unbelievable. And this is where I should caveat, this is where I should put my little asterisk in at the bottom that, past performance is not an indicator of future returns. So I don't think we can necessarily sit here and anticipate this is going to continue forever. We know that valuations are stretched, but this is the game that's being played and the politicians are playing along with it. So hope that video helped. As always, we aim to please, we aim to educate financial literacy, and particularly as it pertains to our housing market. So see you next week.